Hey! Hope everyone has been having wonderful holidays. So, since New Year's Eve is approaching and 2018 is approaching, I wanted to make a video. It's not anything like, top albums or songs or even artists of 2017 because honestly, I don't listen to enough modern music to make anything like that. So I would rather speak more about something that I know more about, which is older bands, because my entire life have spent all my free time basically doing research on bands that are either dead or broken up way before I was even born. So with that, I want to make a video that is going to be focusing on my personal favorite artist from each decade in the rock and roll genre, because I don't ever really talk about any other kind of genre. I got a brand new camera for Christmas. I am going to try to start photographing at festivals and concerts that I go to. So be on the lookout on my Instagram, Lauren Schaffner, for some photos from concerts and other cool things from me. So I'm not an expert, this is all opinion based. I don't know every single rock band that was, prominent during each decade. Every single fact about all of them. This is all just based on a 21-year-old's knowledge of rock and roll. So I'm basically just going to talk about my favorite artists from each decade, maybe some of my favorite songs, why I think they're the dominating of that. And for this video's sake, I'm going to mainly focus on talking about artists whose career was most prominent during that decade. So if a band formed in 1988 but didn't start putting out records until 1994, I'm going to classify them as a 90s band. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the 1960s because I don't really know anything about the 50s other than Elvis and Chuck Berry. They are the ones who shaped rock and roll and what it is today. So, 1960s. I'm probably the black sheep of my family for feeling this way. I grew up in a family who, their religion, their culture, their entire entity is made up of the Beatles. The Beatles are major influences for so many artists that came after them. You have the Rolling Stones. My favorite band from the 1960s is The Doors. I absolutely love Jim Morrison. Everything about his charisma and the way he carries himself, his whole demeanor is just, it was so different than anything else coming out at the time. You had Simon and Garfunkel, the Mamas and the Papas, and just so many artists coming out. And a lot of it was very mellow and very folky. And then you had The Doors. And Jim Morrison, he didn't even want to be a singer. He found a group of people who wanted to play music, and his poetry just fit well with it. But it was so dark and so smart. He was heavily influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche and Aldous Huxley. He came up with the name The Doors from The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. I read that and it was not an easy read because Jim Morrison was so philosophical. I think that he spoke about a lot of things that the media and just America in general, popular television and music didn't want to be spoken about. His message wasn't about spreading peace, it was about finding more about your unconscious and allowing yourself to be yourself and to explore things that you're not comfortable with. The sound was so unique with the organ. Some of my favorite Doors songs, I would say, would be Not to Touch the Earth. I think that song is very strange. The End is absolutely incredible. I mean, it just listening to that song, you feel like you're just going on a journey. Mother, I want you. The Soft Parade is a masterpiece. I highly suggest listening to The Soft Parade if you haven't. That song just goes through so many different phases and it's just so brilliant. He just blew people's minds. Moving on to 1970s. Speaking in terms of the majority of their career was based in the 1970s. Led Zeppelin, they're a late 60s band because they had albums out by 69. The bulk of their career as a band took place in the 70s. They really took what was coming out in the 60s and put a much harder spin on it and made they basically originated hard rock as we know it. And John Bonham just blows any other drummer in the entire world away. Nothing was coming out like that. You have Robert Plant. Nobody was singing like that either. I mean, it inspired musicians like David Coverdale, Axl Rose, Chris Cornell, now Josh Kiska, like so many musicians that came after him using that kind of vocal distortion screaming style. I would say my favorite Led Zeppelin song would have to be 10 Years Gone. I love the guitar in that song and how it goes from, you know, Plant singing so softly to, you know, Page's riffs, and it's very nostalgic. I also really like Thank You. I think that's a beautiful song. They have so many good songs. You know, I also really love Pink Floyd. I love Pink Floyd. There's so many good artists that came out in the 70s. I think I would say that the 70s and the 90s are the two best decades for rock. Moving on to the 80s. If you've seen anything on my channel, you see what I'm wearing, you can guess who I'm gonna say. Guns N' Roses, in my opinion, I think also in a lot of other people's opinions, best rock band to come out of the 1980s. Their career was kind of split between the late 80s and early 90s, but if you figure in how long they were playing up and down Sunset Boulevard from 1985 when they formed until Appetite for Destruction came out, I mean, they had the majority of their career was in the 80s. You had Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Whitesnake, Motley Crue, Poison, hair, glam, pop, rock artists. Have a lot more songs that are just more for the feel good, like have a good time, sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of lifestyle. And then you have Def Leppard. So Appetite for Destruction in 1987 went up against Def Leppard, Hysteria, for the best hard rock album for the year, I believe. And Hysteria was Def Leppard's 4th record. Appetite was Guns N' Roses' 1st. For, you know, the Rookies album to have been compared to another big band from the 80s 4th album, I think that says a lot about Guns N' Roses alone. You Google what is the best-selling debut album of all time, and it is Appetite for Destruction. The record didn't do as good in the beginning until people found the B-side of it, and they heard Sweet Child of Mine, they heard Think About You, they heard Rocket Queen, and all the softer sounding songs, and they said, wow, like, this band has a soft side, but they can also get really hardcore. Appetite for Destruction was about the struggle of being a group of 5 young 20-something-year-old guys having to share a loft together on Sunset Boulevard, pay for shows to play them, and then not make any money in return. They did that for 2 years. As they progressed as a band, and the songs got more deep, Axl just became so personal with his lyrics, and him and Slash's chemistry was so good that Slash was able to make his guitar solos sound as personal as Axl's lyrics. I think a lot of people like to tear on them because they ended up having a lot of commercial success. My favorite Guns N' Roses song is November Rain. I think the song is an absolute masterpiece. It's heartbreaking and it's deep and it's personal, but it's so beautiful at the same time. The 1990s. This is definitely probably the hardest one for me to come up with a definitive answer for. A lot of people don't like to classify grunge as a genre of music. It was a movement. It was a bunch of depressed but very talented musicians writing about very depressing but very real, very true things that a lot of other artists haven't talked about in the past. They talked about drug use, which is a common reoccurring theme in rock and roll songs, but they talked about depression, they talked about hating yourself, all the things that a lot of people, normal people that aren't musicians, can connect with. There's so much good rock and roll came out of the 1990s. Most people, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, most people choose Nirvana. I don't know enough of Nirvana's music. I personally just never got into them enough to explore their other music yet. Alice in Chains and Soundgarden are my top 2. My number 1 is Soundgarden. My dad introduced me to Chris Cornell. A Soundgarden song was on the radio. He told me about Soundgarden, Audio Slave. I fell in love with Audio Slave more then because I was 15 at the time and I thought Soundgarden was still a little dark yet for someone my age. I did see Soundgarden in 2012. I saw them again with 9 Inch Nails in 2014. I saw Chris Cornell do a solo tour in 2013, and then I just saw Soundgarden again this past April, and that was the last time I ever saw Chris Cornell live. Do I dare say that Bad Motorfinger is actually better than Super Unknown? I don't know. All their hits came off of Super Unknown for the most part, but Bad Motorfinger is just so badass. Searching with My Good Eye Closed, that is probably my favorite song by them. I love Room's 1,000 Years Wide. And then I also love Pretty Noose, and that's off of Down on the Upside. But then I love 4th of July and Let Me Drown off of Super Unknowns. Matt Cameron is one of the best drummers. I think that Chris Cornell is probably the best voice in rock and roll. It's such a shame that we lost him. I have a lot of stuff about Chris Cornell on my channel because I felt very connected to him as a fan. Going into the 2000s, this is kind of weird because I don't know, like I said, I don't know that much about modern rock as I do about older rock. I would say my favorite band to have come out of that, and they're still making records today, so come 2025, they're probably still going to be a band by then, but Seether. I absolutely love Seether. When I was in high school, my friend played Broken by Seether with Amy Lee, and I fell in love with the song. Started listening to more Seether. My uncle's a really big fan of him. I got to interview Sean Morgan, from the singer of Seether, this past April at Welcome to Rockville. He just seems like a very, very down-to-earth person. Has a lot of really good insights. He's one of the best lyricists I've ever heard because he uses such a vast variety of vocabulary in his songs. And he has an awesome voice too. And it's funny because they're South African. So he actually, you know, he gets up there and he's screaming on stage. But then he comes down and I meet him and he shakes my hand and he says, "Hello, how are you?" Some of my favorite songs by them are Walk Away from the Sun, Cigarettes, Save Today, Same Damn Life. Seether's an awesome band and I think they're widely underrated. So going into the 2010s, 2010s, what would you call this decade? I don't listen to a lot of modern rock. Going to all of these festivals over the past couple of years have opened my eyes to some other artists, but a lot of the rock and roll that comes out today is very, very heavy, very alternative, a lot of screaming, and I'm not really into that. I'm not against it. I don't dislike it, but I would much rather hear something with a more 90s sound or classic rock sound. So, you know, I really like Greta Van Fleet. I really like Hailstorm. I have to say, and this is probably also an unpopular opinion, but my favorite band of this decade is The Pretty Reckless. As a girl getting into rock and roll, having someone like Taylor Momsen to kind of look up to as an idol has been really, really life-changing for me in a way, because all of my idols before listening to The Pretty Reckless were male. You know, I'm not a big feminist or anything like that. In 2015, I went to Welcome to Rockville with my roommate for the first time, and she told me that Cindy Lou Who had a band called The Pretty Reckless, so she really wanted to go see them. We went and saw their set. Taylor came out on stage. She just had this vibe about her that was very rock and roll, very aggressive, and I really, really took to it. Taylor Momsen became an idol for me. After idolizing her for 2 years, I ended up getting to meet her and interview her at the exact festival where I saw them for the first time. After hearing her talk about how excited she was to open for Soundgarden, because that's been her favorite band her whole life, and she's following her dreams, and she put acting aside, and, you know, she's not doing a Miley Cyrus and going absolutely buck wild to try to get rid of her childhood image as Cindy Lou Who. She's just letting the music take its course. She's being true to rock and roll and true to herself, and her songs are getting more mature as the band gets older. She's only 24, so I mean, they still have a lot left to go. Some of my favorite songs by them are Hangman off of the new record. I think that's an absolutely awesome song. Sounds very much like Alice in Chains. Follow Me Down, House on a Hill, Under the Water. People just need to give them more of a chance. I think that a lot of people are stumped by the fact that she is a woman. So those are my favorite bands of each decade. I'd love to hear your feedback and what you guys' favorite ones are. So definitely comment below. And everybody have a great, safe, wonderful, but very fun New Year's Eve. See you in 2018, guys.